Close your eyes and take a deep breath. In the hush of a gentle night, imagine a mythic world unfolding around you. A silver moon hangs low in the sky, painting soft light on ancient trees and misty hills. The air is warm and still, and every sound you hear is calm and distant. The whisper of leaves, the far-off murmur of a lyre carried on the breeze. In this quiet world, time slows down. Each moment stretches softly into the next. As you breathe slowly in and out, feel the present day fade away. You find yourself standing at the edge of an enchanted forest in old Greece, where legends are born under starry skies. Let the silence drift around you, as comforting as a familiar lullaby. Tonight, a story of love and sorrow will guide you into rest. It is the tale of a musician whose music was so beautiful that even the wind and water paused to listen, the story of Orpheus and his beloved Eurydice. Their tale is filled with tenderness and longing, with joy and heartbreak that touched even the gods. And as this cursed love story gently unfolds, you can simply listen, breathe, and drift along. Take another deep breath now, filling your lungs with the cool night air of this imagined world. Then exhale slowly, releasing any tension. Feel the quiet of the ancient forest welcome you. Let the starlight and the soft chorus of crickets lull you further into tranquility. Now, let us begin our journey, stepping softly into the past, into a land of myth, where love reaches beyond life and death. Beneath that same moon in ages past lived Orpheus, a young man gifted with the most enchanting music. When Orpheus plucked the strings of his lyre and sang, the world itself grew calm to listen. Birds hushed their twilight songs, and creatures of the forest, deer, foxes, even lions crept closer, tamed by the gentle notes. Trees seemed to bend nearer, and it was said even rivers would slow their flow, enchanted by the melodies of Orpheus. Orpheus had a kind and tender heart. In village squares and under shady groves, people would gather to hear him play, and as they listened, worries faded from their minds. But among all who cherished his music, there was one soul who held Orpheus's heart above all else, a maiden named Eurydice. Eurydice was a nymph of the meadows, graceful and gentle. She moved like a soft breeze through tall grass, and her laugh was like the tinkling of a clear stream. The first time Orpheus saw Eurydice, she was dancing barefoot by a glade at dusk, her dark curls catching the last golden rays of sun. In that moment, love blossomed between them, a love deep and true, as natural as a song meeting its harmony. From then on, Orpheus and Eurydice were inseparable. Under ancient oak trees and along babbling brooks, they wandered hand in hand, their days filled with laughter, music, and quiet joy. Often, they would rest in the shade of a willow by the river's edge. Orpheus would play a soft lullaby on his lyre, and Eurydice would lean against him, humming along while watching the sunlight dance on the water. In those moments, time seemed to stand still for the two lovers. They felt as though their happiness might last forever. In time, Orpheus asked Eurydice to be his wife, and she happily said yes. Their wedding day dawned warm and bright. Eurydice wore a crown of wildflowers in her hair, and Orpheus's music soared with pure joy as she walked toward him through a field of blooming roses. The birds sang sweetly in the trees that morning, as if joining in celebration. When they exchanged vows, a gentle breeze carried their whispered promises into the sky. It seemed the whole world rejoiced in their union of music and love. For a short while after, Orpheus and Eurydice lived in simple bliss as husband and wife. They made their home in a cozy cottage on the edge of the forest. Evenings found them sitting together on the porch step, watching fireflies dance in the twilight. Orpheus would softly strum a new melody on his lyre just for her, and Eurydice would close her eyes, smiling, letting the music wash over her like a warm wave. In those peaceful days and nights, their hearts were so full and content that neither could imagine any force ever tearing them apart. Yet, even amid their joy, fate was quietly watching. Though they did not know it, their story, like many great love stories, was destined to take a tragic turn. And so, as the stars turned above and time flowed onward, the moment drew near when everything would change for Orpheus and Eurydice. One serene afternoon, Not long after the wedding, Eurydice wandered through the meadow with a few nymph companions. The sun was golden and high, and the sweet scent of summer wildflowers filled the air. Eurydice strolled lightly in the tall grass, perhaps chasing a bright butterfly or gathering blossoms in her hands, her laughter ringing like a bell across the field. She did not see the shadow coiled in the green, a snake resting in the warmth of the day. In a single instant, fate struck. As Eurydice stepped through the grass, the viper darted out and sank its fangs into her ankle. Eurydice gasped and stumbled, the bouquet of flowers falling from her hands. A sharp pain coursed through her, and the world around her seemed to tremble. She managed to cry out once, a strangled call of "Orpheus!" before her legs gave way beneath her. The nymphs who were with her scattered in alarm, their cries echoing through the trees as Eurydice fell to the ground. Hearing his name on the wind, Orpheus came running, his heart suddenly clenched with dread. He found Eurydice lying among the wildflowers, her skin growing cold, her breath shallow. With trembling arms, he gathered her to his chest. Eurydice's eyes fluttered open for a brief moment as she looked at Orpheus. A tear slipped down her cheek. She tried to speak, but no words came, only a soft sigh as her eyes closed and her head gently tilted in his arms. Eurydice was gone. Orpheus held his beloved as life ebbed from her body, his mind unable to accept what had happened. He called her name over and over, voice breaking, but Eurydice did not stir. The golden afternoon light faded into a gray twilight as if the sun itself mourned. A hush fell over the meadow. The breeze died, and the birds were silent. The world held its breath in sorrow. Cradling Eurydice's still form, Orpheus felt a pain like no other, a deep, hollow sorrow that reached into his very soul. Tears streamed down his face as he rocked her gently, surrounded by scattered flowers now wilting in the dimming light. In desperation and grief, Orpheus lifted his face to the sky and let out a melody of lament, a song of pure agony. He sang of her beauty, of their happiness, of the cruelty of fate, his voice echoing over the silent fields. His sorrowful song rang out into the heavens and down to the darkest depths of the earth. It is said that as Orpheus sang in mourning, all of nature wept with him. The nymphs hiding at the forest's edge sobbed softly into their hands. Dryads in the trees felt their hearts break. Even the gods on their distant thrones heard the lament, and they, too, were moved to tears by the raw love and despair in Orpheus's music. Take a deep breath now, and let it out slowly, letting the sadness of this moment flow through you and away. The tale of Orpheus and Eurydice is sorrowful, but remember you are safe, simply listening as the story gently carries you onward. When at last his song ended, the twilight had deepened and a few stars had appeared, timid and sad, in the sky. Orpheus remained kneeling in the meadow with Eurydice in his arms, his tears spent and his heart desolate. Yet in that silent gloom, as crickets began to cry a plaintive chorus, something stirred inside Orpheus besides grief. It was resolve. He would not accept this loss. He could not. Eurydice was his love, his life, and he was determined to find her, even if he had to venture into the realm of death itself to bring her back. Gently, Orpheus laid Eurydice's body upon the soft earth and kissed her cold forehead. "Wait for me, my love," he whispered, voice steady with new purpose. Then, with one final, sorrowful look at his beloved, Orpheus rose, wiped his tears, and set off toward the distant dark path that led down into the underworld. Orpheus traveled to the far edge of the world, where a cold, dark cave led down into the land of Hades. Night had fallen by the time he arrived at the cave's mouth. A chill wind sighed from deep inside, and the entrance was overgrown with twisting ivy and gray moss. Taking a steady breath, Orpheus stepped forward into the darkness, determined and unafraid. Down and down he went, descending a winding path carved into stone. The air grew cool and heavy, and soon the light of the world above faded behind him. In the utter blackness, Orpheus's footsteps echoed softly. Water dripped from distant cavern ceilings in a slow, steady rhythm. With each step, the shadows around him deepened. To keep his courage, Orpheus lifted his lyre and began to play a gentle tune as he walked. The soft notes fluttered through the tunnel like a small, brave bird. In that emptiness, his music was a companion. The delicate sound guided him when his eyes could see nothing. The melody eased the oppressing silence and turned it into something almost beautiful. Before long, a faint glimmer appeared ahead, a pale, ghostly light. Orpheus emerged from the tunnel onto the shore of a vast underground river. Its waters were black and still, barely reflecting the eerie glow of the cavern. This was the river Styx, which all souls must cross to enter the underworld. Waiting at the water's edge was the old ferryman, Charon, wrapped in a tattered cloak. His eyes were hollow, and he held a long pole in his bony hand, resting on an ancient boat. Charon shook his head slowly when he saw that Orpheus was a living man. No mortal was normally allowed to cross the Styx without a golden coin and without being a shade. Orpheus had neither coin nor the pallor of death. He stood on the bank, the dark water lapping at his feet, and knew he must persuade this silent guardian. So Orpheus raised his lyre once more and played. The song he offered was soft and pleading, filled with the loneliness of a man separated from his love. The music drifted over the black waters like a gentle breeze. Charon paused, listening. He had ferried countless spirits over this river, and his ancient heart had long grown numb. But now a single tear fell from the ferryman's eye, rippling the dark surface of the Styx. Without a word, Charon beckoned Orpheus into the boat. Orpheus stepped aboard, and the ferryman pushed off. The boat glided silently across the Styx. In the darkness around them, Orpheus could make out pale shapes just under the water, wandering souls floating in the current. Some reached out thin hands toward the sound of Orpheus's lyre, as if the music reminded them of life and light. Orpheus continued to play quietly, a comforting lullaby for all who would listen, and the ghosts of the departed closed their eyes, swaying gently in the water as if eased of pain. When they reached the far shore, Orpheus stepped onto the ashen ground of the underworld. He thanked Charon softly. The ferryman, usually grim and silent, inclined his head in respect. Orpheus's music had touched even his stony heart. The boat drifted away, and Charon vanished into the mist, leaving Orpheus alone at the gates of Hades' realm. Before him stretched a vast plain of dimly lit fields, filled with colorless flowers, and the whispering shades of those who had passed on. This was Persephone's garden, where gentle souls wandered without pain or joy, merely shadows of their former selves. Farther beyond, in the deeper gloom, lay the dark palace of Hades. But guarding the gates to that inner realm was a monstrous sight that would freeze the blood of any other mortal. Cerberus, the great three-headed hound. Cerberus stood alert, 3 pairs of eyes gleaming like coals in the dark. All 3 heads snarled as they sensed a living presence. The beast's growls rumbled through the air. Each of its mouths showed fangs sharp and white. Chains clinked as the huge hound padded forward, blocking Orpheus's path. Calmly, Orpheus held up his lyre once more. Instead of cowering or fleeing, he began to pluck a new tune, a lullaby, as tender as the one he used to play on warm nights beside Eurydice. The melody rose softly, echoing in the silent plain. Cerberus bared its teeth, ready to pounce. But then the gentle music reached the creature's ears. One of the dog's heads cocked to the side, ears perking up at the sweet sound. Another head stopped growling to listen. The third head let out one last confused whine before all 3 gradually fell quiet. The fierce red glow in their eyes dimmed. Slowly, the great hound lowered itself to the ground. Its bristling tails went limp, and an enormous yawn escaped one mouth, then the next, then the last. Within moments, the fearsome guardian of Hades was curled up by the gate, fast asleep, lulled into slumber by Orpheus's soothing song. Orpheus stepped carefully past the sleeping giant, giving a grateful nod to the creature, who let out a soft, snoring sigh in return. Now nothing stood between Orpheus and his goal. He pushed open the great iron gates, which creaked and groaned, and entered the hall of Hades. Inside, the cavernous throne room of the underworld opened before him. The ceilings were high and lost in shadow. Pale asphodel flowers grew in clusters along the obsidian floor, and spirits of the dead stood silently in attendance like an otherworldly audience. At the far end of the hall, on thrones of black stone, sat Hades, king of the underworld, and Persephone, his queen. Hades was imposing, a tall figure draped in robes as dark as midnight. His hair and beard were coal-black, and his face, though handsome, was severe and unreadable. A gleaming crown of onyx circled his head. Persephone beside him was ethereal and lovely, with a face both youthful and sorrowful. Her hair fell in long dark waves, adorned with a wreath of wilted flowers. As the goddess of spring who dwelled half the year in Hades' realm, Persephone's beauty was touched with an everlasting sadness. The rulers of the dead watched curiously as Orpheus, a living man, approached their thrones. Hades's cold eyes narrowed, and he clenched the arm of his throne, unsure whether to be angered by this intrusion. Persephone leaned forward slightly, a spark of compassion in her gaze as she regarded the brave musician. Around the hall, the faint shapes of countless souls also turned toward Orpheus. In that land of endless twilight, a warm-blooded mortal was a rare sight indeed. Orpheus could feel the hush in the air, an expectancy, a hope and longing emanating from the silent crowd of spirits. They could sense he came for love, and perhaps it reminded them of life. Orpheus's own heart pounded in his chest. He had come so far and now stood before the very throne of death. But he knew what he must do. With reverence, he knelt on one knee, bowed his head, and brought forth his lyre for the most important song he would ever play. Kneeling in that silent hall, Orpheus began to sing. At first his voice was trembling and low, but as he poured his heart into the music, it grew steady and clear. He sang of Eurydice, of her gentle smile, and the way her laughter brought life to every corner of the world. He sang of the warmth of her hand in his, of the joy they shared under sunlit skies. He sang of the emptiness that now filled his life since she was gone, and the darkness that had fallen upon his soul. Each note was weighted with longing. Each word was a tear transformed into sound. Time seemed to stop in the underworld. Every flickering spirit, every lurking shadow, stood still to listen. Persephone cupped a hand to her mouth, and tears glistened in the queen's eyes as she remembered her own days of innocence above, and the ache of being separated from loved ones. Hades sat rigid on his throne, his knuckles white as he gripped his staff. The song reached even him, stirring feelings long buried in his heart. As Orpheus's voice rose and fell in that mournful aria, a gentle weeping could be heard among the unseen throng of spirits. Even the three-headed Cerberus, just outside the hall, whined softly in its sleep, dreaming of the distant music. Then Orpheus wove into his song a plea not just for himself but for the power of love and the mercy of the gods. His fingers moved deftly over the lyre strings, and his voice, pure and earnest, echoed like a prayer. Hear me, O noble king and gentle queen. I come bearing only my love and this song. My world is empty without Eurydice, my heart a lyre with broken strings. If ever you have loved, if ever you have lost, you know the sorrow I sing of. I do not fear darkness if she is by my side. Grant me this boon. Let her return with me to the light. If there is a price, let it fall on me, for life without her is a fate worse than death. As the last note of Orpheus's song faded, a profound silence fell. It was as if the very halls of the underworld were holding their breath. Orpheus kept his head bowed, tears slipping down his face onto the cold floor, his whole being devoted to that final hope. He had done all he could. The decision now lay with Hades and Persephone. For a long moment, Hades was still and silent. No one in that hall dared to move. Finally, the lord of the underworld stood, his dark robes swirling around him. There were indeed tears in Hades' eyes, and when he spoke, his deep voice was quiet, filled with an unexpected compassion. You may have what you came for, Hades declared slowly. Even as he said it, a faint, amazed whisper rippled through the gathered spirits. The king of the dead himself had been moved to mercy, a thing unheard of. Persephone's face lit with a sad smile, and she placed a gentle hand on her husband's arm as he continued. Eurydice shall be returned to you, Orpheus, on one condition. Orpheus looked up, hope sparking in his chest like the first glow of dawn. Anything, he whispered. Hades's dark eyes met Orpheus's gaze. As you lead her out of my realm, she will walk behind you. You must not look back at her until you both have reached the world of the living. Not by torchlight, not by starlight, only under the sun may you turn to embrace your wife. If you look too soon, even for an instant, Eurydice will vanish back into the darkness, and this time forever. That is my condition. Orpheus trembled, not from fear, but from the overwhelming emotion that flooded through him. Joy, gratitude, and anxiety all mingled in his heart. He bowed deeply, promising he would obey. Thank you, he said earnestly, voice choked with feeling. Thank you, my lord Hades, and my lady Persephone. The queen of the underworld stepped forward then. With a tender smile, Persephone called softly into the shadows, Eurydice, come forth. From the dimness at the edge of the throne room, a figure emerged, the spirit of Eurydice. She was pale and translucent, like a blossom made of morning mist. Orpheus's breath caught in his throat at the sight of her. Though he longed to run to her and take her in his arms, he held himself in check, remembering the condition. Eurydice moved to stand just behind Orpheus, close enough that he could sense her presence, feel the gentle aura of her love, but not touch. Her eyes, though filled with yearning, were calm. She trusted him. For a moment, husband and wife stood so near, and yet separated by that fragile rule that now bound them. Persephone drew a small breath and spoke kindly, Go, both of you, and may the fates be gentle. Hades gestured toward the open doorway with a solemn nod. With profound gratitude in his heart, Orpheus straightened. Keeping his eyes forward and fighting the urge to gaze at Eurydice, he began to walk. Eurydice followed, her footsteps making no sound on the cold floor. Together, they crossed the hall and passed through the gates of the underworld, beginning the journey upward, back toward life, back toward the light above. Step by step, Orpheus and Eurydice ascended through the darkness. The path upward was steep and winding, the same way Orpheus had come. Now, however, he climbed with hope blooming in his chest. Eurydice's spirit followed just behind him, silent and light as a feather's shadow. In the deep quiet, Orpheus could not hear her footfall or feel her hand. He had only faith to trust that she was truly there. He kept his eyes fixed forward, remembering Hades' warning. The tunnel was nearly pitch black, save for the faintest hint of glow from far ahead, the promise of daylight. Orpheus's heart pounded with anticipation. Stay calm, stay patient, he told himself, even as he yearned to turn and see his wife. The silence pressed on him. To soothe his nerves, Orpheus whispered a soft melody under his breath, a reassuring tune for Eurydice and for himself. He imagined Eurydice smiling just behind him, perhaps reaching out her hand, almost but not quite touching his shoulder. As they climbed higher, a cool breeze began to flow down the passage, carrying with it the fresh scent of morning. The pinprick of light in the distance grew brighter, whiter. Dawn was breaking above. Orpheus felt a surge of joy. They were so close now. Just a little further and this nightmare would be over. But doubt, subtle and cold, crept into Orpheus's mind. Why was Eurydice so quiet? He had not heard her voice since they left Hades' hall. What if the gods had deceived him? Could it be that no one was truly behind him at all? The thought struck him with dread. Perhaps Hades had sent only an illusion of Eurydice, a trick of the shadows, while his real love remained among the dead. Or perhaps Eurydice was following, but as a fragile shade who might dissolve before reaching the sunlight. Orpheus clenched his jaw and banished these doubts. He had to trust Persephone's gentle promise, to trust in his own music and love. Eurydice was there. She had to be. He forced himself to keep walking, one hand trailing along the damp wall of the tunnel to steady himself, the other gripping his lyre. The rectangle of brightness at the tunnel's end grew larger with every step. Finally, after what felt like an eternity in darkness, Orpheus reached the threshold of the living world. Sunlight streamed in, dazzling his eyes that had long grown and used to it. He stepped out from the cave into the soft golden light of early morning. Warmth kissed his skin. He could hear the sweet sound of birds singing in distant trees. Joy welled up inside him. He had made it out. In that ecstatic moment, forgetting himself, Orpheus spun around to share his relief with Eurydice. "We're here!" he began to exclaim, a radiant smile breaking across his face as his eyes eagerly sought his beloved. The smile froze on Orpheus's face. Eurydice was indeed right behind him in the tunnel, but not yet fully in the sun. She stood in the dimness just a few steps away, her form pale and wreathed in shadow. Their eyes met for one heartbreakingly brief moment. Eurydice's beautiful face was filled with love for him, and also gentle sorrow, as if she had expected this fate. She opened her mouth as if to speak, to tell him something, but before any sound could form, her image began to waver. Orpheus realized his mistake in an instant, but it was too late. He had looked back too soon. "No, please, no," Orpheus cried, reaching out desperately. He watched in horror as Eurydice's ghostly figure was pulled away from him. It was as if an invisible wind had caught her, drawing her back into the darkness of the cave. Her outstretched hand drifted away from his fingertips. Eurydice gave one last faint smile, full of love and forgiveness, even as her form faded like mist in the brightening air. In a hushed voice, barely more than a breath, she spoke his name one final time, "Orpheus," and then Eurydice was gone. The gentle morning light fell upon an empty cave entrance. Orpheus stood there, arms still reaching into the shadows, but there was nothing, only the cool air. A great silence descended, broken only by the distant rustle of leaves. For a moment, Orpheus remained frozen, his mind refusing to accept what his eyes had seen. Then a shudder ran through him. "Eurydice!" he screamed, the sound echoing off the rocky walls and startling a flock of birds into flight. Wild with grief, Orpheus plunged back into the cave, hoping against hope that he might find her once more. But the path was now dark and empty. The way to the underworld was shut. Orpheus stumbled through the tunnel, calling Eurydice's name again and again, his voice growing hoarse. There was no reply, only the mournful echoes of his own cries. At the river's edge, he begged Charon to appear and take him back across. But the black waters remained still and silent. The ferryman did not come. He even played a few frantic, broken notes on his lyre, hoping to lure the boat back, but only his own sobs returned to him. At last, after wandering blindly in the blackness, Orpheus understood that he was truly alone. The gods had given him one chance, and by a single moment of doubt, it was lost. Eurydice was gone, this time forever. Slowly, heart heavy as stone, Orpheus made his way out of the cave once more. The bright day had fully dawned. Golden sunlight flooded the meadow where he now stood, but to Orpheus it felt cold and colorless. He sank to his knees at the mouth of the cave, exhausted and hollow. Orpheus did not weep this time. His grief was now too deep for tears. He simply knelt there in quiet despair, his head bowed. In his mind he replayed that final look on Eurydice's face, the soft acceptance in her eyes as she slipped away. That gentle gaze seemed to tell him, "I love you, I forgive you." A soft breeze moved through the tall grass, and Orpheus imagined it was Eurydice's spirit passing by, caressing his cheek one last time. He stayed there for a long while, neither alive to joy nor entirely dead in spirit, just a man carved by sorrow, lingering where he had last seen the love of his life. In the days and months that followed, Orpheus wandered the earth like a hollow man. The once bright melodies he played turned to slow, sorrowful hymns. He roamed the hills and riversides where he and Eurydice had walked, his music now filled with the echo of irreparable loss. Animals and people alike would listen and weep, for every note he played told of the heartbreak that even the gods had not been able to mend. No other love ever came to Orpheus's heart. It remained faithfully with Eurydice. He lived only in memories and song. Many nights he spent sitting by a quiet stream or under the black sky, strumming his lyre softly and gazing at the stars, whispering Eurydice's name into the darkness. Some say the river spirits and forest nymphs tried to comfort him, but nothing could lift the veil of sadness from his gentle eyes. Yet, in his grief, Orpheus harbored no anger, only a deep, endless longing. His music, though mournful, was achingly beautiful, and it's said that the gods themselves continued to be moved by the sound of Orpheus's laments. They wept for him as he had wept for Eurydice, their tears falling as quiet rain that rippled the rivers where he played. At last, in time's own mercy, Orpheus's earthly life drew to an end. One peaceful morning, he simply vanished from the world of the living. Perhaps the Muses, those kindly goddesses of art, gently carried him away, or perhaps Apollo, who had long watched over his gifted son, took pity and lifted Orpheus up to the heavens. However it happened, death came to Orpheus not as violence, but as a soft release, a final rest for the weary bard. When Orpheus opened his eyes again, he found himself standing on the other side of life, in the twilight fields of the underworld. And there, Eurydice was waiting for him. The moment she saw Orpheus, her face blossomed into a radiant smile. This time, there were no conditions, no barriers. Eurydice ran to Orpheus and he caught her in his arms at last. He held her close as they both laughed and cried tears of joy. In that gentle realm of shadows, their spirits twined together, never to be separated again. It's said that even Hades and Persephone looked on at this reunion with soft smiles, for in their hearts they were glad that love had ultimately found a way. Orpheus and Eurydice departed hand in hand toward the meadows of the blessed, where they would dwell in peace. Their love, tested by so many trials, shone brighter than ever, an eternal light in the dark. To honor the beauty and devotion of Orpheus's music, the gods lifted his lyre into the night sky, and so a new constellation was born, Lyra. The lyre glitters among the stars to this day. Those stars hang high above, a reminder to the world of a love so strong it moved heaven and earth. On clear nights, if you listen closely, you might imagine the faint strains of Orpheus's lyre still playing, a tender lullaby from the stars. Now, dear listener, the tale of Orpheus and Eurydice comes to a close. It has been a journey through love and loss, through darkness and back into light. Though their story is bittersweet, it carries a gentle promise that love endures, that even in sorrow there is beauty, and that no goodbye is ever absolute. For those we cherish live on in our hearts and memories. Take a deep breath and let the calm of the night wash over you. Feel the quiet comfort that stories like this bring, a reminder that even tragedy can whisper lessons of love and hope. Above you, the stars watch like old friends. Perhaps Orpheus's lyre is among them, silently playing a soothing melody just for you. Let your eyes grow heavy now, and your mind drift in this peaceful feeling. Imagine Eurydice and Orpheus together in a tranquil forever, walking side by side under silver starlight. In the same way, you are safe here in the dark, cherished, and at peace. As the last notes of this story fade, allow yourself to fall gently asleep. May your dreams be filled with calm and the assurance that love surrounds you. Tonight, the gods themselves guard your rest, and the music of the stars will keep you company till the dawn. Good night.